Commander Zekthara pressed her six-fingered hand against the cool metal of her command console, her violet eyes scanning the star charts displayed before her. The Galactic Coalition had been at war with the Void Reapers for 3 cycles now, and every battle brought nothing but losses. The insectoid enemy seemed unstoppable, their dark ships consuming entire star systems like hungry parasites. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had earned her command of the Coalition's 3rd Fleet despite being only 200 years old, practically a child by Zalithian standards. Lieutenant Mordak, a crystalline being whose body reflected the bridge's amber lighting, turned from his station. "The Reapers have taken another system, Commander. The mining colonies of Zirian 7 went dark 6 hours ago. No survivors detected." Zekthara's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Coalition was losing this war badly. Despite their superior numbers and advanced technology, the Reapers possessed something that defied all logic. They seemed to grow stronger with each victory, as if they fed on the defeat of their enemies. "Any word from the Council?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The same response, Commander. Hold the line. Reinforcements are coming." Mordak's crystalline form dimmed slightly, a sign of his own frustration. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Every species in the Coalition had contributed their best warriors, their finest ships, their most advanced weapons. The proud Zalithians with their superior intellect, the mighty Corvin with their incredible strength, the ethereal Nexari with their mastery over energy itself, all had proven insufficient against the Reaper threat. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Vextar, commander of the Coalition forces. His usually proud demeanor seemed deflated. "Commander Zekthara," he began without preamble, "I'm transmitting new orders. The Council has authorized the activation of Protocol 7. Zekthara's blood ran cold. Protocol 7 was the last resort. The systematic evacuation of core worlds in preparation for total withdrawal. "Sir, surely there must be another option. My fleet is still combat capable, and the decision has been made," Vextar interrupted. "The war is lost, Commander. We're preparing for the long retreat to the Outer Rim territories. Perhaps there we can regroup and find some way to..." The transmission cut abruptly as alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. Sensor Officer Krelnox, a mantis-like creature with compound eyes, suddenly straightened at his station. "Commander, massive spatial distortion detected at the edge of the system. Something's coming through hyperspace." "Reapers?" Zekthara demanded, already moving toward the tactical display. "Negative. The signature is unknown, unlike anything in our databases." The main screen shifted to show long-range sensors. A swirling vortex of energy appeared in the void, growing larger by the second. From within its depths, shapes began to emerge. Ships, but unlike any the Coalition had ever encountered. They were crude by galactic standards, their hulls a patchwork of metals and alloys that shouldn't have been able to hold together under the stress of faster-than-light travel. Yet they moved with purpose, hundreds of them pouring through the spatial rift like warriors charging into battle. "Are they another Reaper faction?" Mordak asked, his voice tinged with fear. Before Zekthara could respond, her communications officer, a telepathic Mindari named Sylphara, gasped audibly. Her large, dark eyes went wide with something approaching terror. "Commander, I'm receiving a transmission. It's an old galactic, but the syntax is wrong. Primitive. They're requesting permission to help." "Help?" Zekthara couldn't hide her confusion. "Who are they?" Sylphara pressed her delicate fingers to her temples, concentrating on the alien thoughts touching her mind. "They call themselves humans. They say they've come to join the war against the Void Reapers." A collective silence fell over the bridge. Every member of the crew knew the old stories, the myths passed down through generations of spacefaring species. Humans were legend, a species that supposedly existed somewhere in the outer spiral arms, too primitive to achieve faster-than-light travel, if they existed at all. Impossible qu'elle n'existe. The human myth speaks of a species barely out of their stone age. These ships, primitive as they are, require technology centuries beyond what the legends describe. Zekthara found herself staring at the tactical display, watching as more human ships continued to pour through the portal. There were thousands now, and they showed no signs of stopping. "Open a channel," she ordered. The view screen flickered, and suddenly, she was looking at something that defied belief. The creature, the human, appeared remarkably similar to the ancient artistic depictions found in archaeological sites across the galaxy. Bipedal, with pale skin and strange hair growing from its scalp. But where the myths described a primitive, barely sentient being, this human's eyes held an intelligence that was both familiar and utterly alien. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Navy," the human said, her voice carrying through the translation matrix with surprising clarity. "We received your distress signals and have come to assist against the Reaper threat." You received our signals?" Zekthara struggled to form the words. "That's impossible. We've been broadcasting on emergency frequencies that require quantum encryption protocols developed only 50 years ago." The human, Admiral Chun, smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both warmth and predatory satisfaction. "We've been watching, Commander. Learning. We know about your war with the Reapers, and we know you're losing. The myths say your species lacks faster-than-light technology," Zekthara said, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "Myths have a way of becoming outdated," Chun replied. "We've had FTL capability for over 2 centuries now. We just chosen to remain hidden while we prepared." As if to emphasize her point, the human fleet began forming battle lines with a precision that spoke of extensive military training. Their ships might have looked crude, but their formation was flawless. "Commander," Krell called out urgently. "Reaper forces detected. 3 full battle groups dropping out of hyperspace on our position." The view screen split to show the approaching enemy fleet. Massive, organic-looking ships that seemed to absorb light itself, moving with the inexorable purpose of a plague. The Coalition had learned to fear that sight. It meant death for everyone in the system. "All ships, prepare for retreat," Zekthara ordered, her training overriding her curiosity about the humans. "We cannot win against 3 battle groups." "Belay that order," Admiral Chen's voice cut through the bridge chatter. "Human fleet, weapons free. Let's show these things why Earth doesn't give up." What happened next would be recorded in Coalition military history for millennia to come. The human ships, seemingly fragile and primitive, opened fire with weapons that defied every known law of physics. Beams of pure energy that burned brighter than stars, projectile weapons that moved at significant fractions of light speed, and missiles that seemed to bend space-time around themselves. The first Reaper ship to be hit simply vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled. It ceased to exist as if it had never been there at all. "What kind of weapons are those?" Mordak whispered, his crystalline form flashing with colors that indicated extreme confusion. The humans pressed their attack with a ferocity that left the Coalition officers stunned. They didn't retreat when the Reapers returned fire, didn't falter when their own ships took damage. Instead, they seemed to become more determined, more aggressive. A human vessel, its hull breached and venting atmosphere, rammed itself directly into a Reaper heavy cruiser. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. "Insane," Krell chittered. "They're completely insane." But their insanity was working. The Reaper fleet, which had never before retreated from any engagement, began to fall back. Their dark ships, so terrifying to every other species in the galaxy, seemed almost hesitant in the face of human aggression. "All Coalition vessels," Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm again, "form up on our flanks. We're going to finish this." Zekthara found herself giving orders to follow the human battle plan, caught up in something she didn't fully understand. Her ships moved into position alongside the human fleet, and for the first time in 3 years of war, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, not a single Reaper ship remained in the system. The human fleet had taken heavy casualties, but they showed no sign of mourning their losses. Instead, they seemed energized by their victory. Commander Zekthra, Admiral Chun, appeared on the view screen again, her strange human face marked with what their species apparently used to indicate satisfaction. "We need to talk. There's a lot your coalition doesn't know about this war, and even more you don't know about us." As Zekthra looked at the debris field that had once been an undefeatable Reaper fleet, she realized that everything was about to change. The myths had been wrong about humanity. They weren't primitive at all. They were something far more dangerous. They were warriors who had been preparing for war, while the rest of the galaxy fought for survival. "Admiral Chun," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I think the Coalition would be very interested in hearing what you have to say." The human smiled again, and this time Zekthra recognized the expression for what it truly was, the look of a predator that had finally decided to stop hiding and start hunting. In the weeks that followed, word of the human intervention spread throughout Coalition space like wildfire. Species that had considered humanity nothing more than myths suddenly found themselves forced to accept a new reality. Somewhere in the outer spiral arms, a civilization had been growing, learning, and preparing for a war that the rest of the galaxy had been losing. Emergency sessions of the Coalition Council were called. Archaeological teams were dispatched to re-examine ancient human artifacts with fresh eyes. Military strategists pored over recordings of the battle, trying to understand weapons and tactics that seemed to operate on principles unknown to galactic science. Most importantly, diplomatic envoys were sent to establish formal contact with this species that had just proven they could accomplish what the entire Coalition could not: defeat the Reapers in open combat. But perhaps the most significant change was in the hearts and minds of Coalition citizens. For the first time since the war began, there was genuine hope. If the humans could defeat a Reaper battle group, perhaps the war wasn't lost after all. What none of them yet realized was that the single human fleet that had intervened was just the advanced scout of something much larger. Earth had been preparing for this moment for over 2 centuries, and they had prepared well. The myths had been wrong about humanity's primitive nature, but they had been absolutely correct about one thing. Humans were unlike any other species in the galaxy. The Coalition was about to learn exactly what that meant for the war against the Void Reapers. And the Reapers, for the first time in their existence, were about to discover what it meant to face an enemy that didn't just fight for survival, but fought because they genuinely enjoyed the challenge. The Coalition High Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 14 different species gathered around the massive circular table. Holographic displays showed real-time updates from across the galaxy, each one telling the same impossible story. Human fleets were appearing everywhere, and they were winning. Chancellor Vorthe K, the ancient Corvin who had led the Coalition for over 4 centuries, raised his massive fist for silence. His species was renowned for their strength and combat prowess, but even he seemed diminished by recent events. 3 weeks, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. 3 weeks since first contact with these humans, and they've already reclaimed 12 systems that we lost months ago. The Mindari representative, her ethereal form shimmering with distress, projected her thoughts directly into the minds of those present. Their psychology is unlike anything in our databases. They don't fight for survival, they fight for sport. When our telepods attempt to scan their warriors, all we find is excitement. Joy in battle. Dr. Kavalin, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, and one of the few Nexari who chose to maintain physical form, manipulated the central display with gestures of her energy-based appendages. I've analyzed the biological samples they provided. Humans shouldn't be capable of what we've observed. Their reflexes are too slow, their strength too limited, their lifespans too brief. Yet somehow they're outperforming our best warriors. It's not about individual capability, interjected General Morthane, the Coalition's supreme military commander. The Scar veteran had lost more battles to the Reapers than anyone cared to count. It's about how they fight as a collective. They've turned warfare into something approaching art. The chamber's main screen activated, showing Admiral Chen materializing as a hologram. The human appeared relaxed despite being in what Coalition intelligence knew was the command center of a massive space station that definitely hadn't existed a month ago. "Good afternoon, counselors," Chun said with that unsettling human smile. "I trust you've reviewed our proposal." Chancellor Vorthake leaned forward, his enormous frame creating shadows across the table. "Admiral, your species' military capabilities are impressive, but your proposal suggests a complete restructuring of Coalition forces. You're asking us to abandon 3 centuries of military doctrine. Your military doctrine has lost you half the galaxy," Chen replied bluntly. "The Reapers aren't just another enemy. They're a hive mind that adapts to conventional tactics within hours. You need to start thinking like predators, not prey." The Zalithian council member, Prime Intellect Zaraneth, activated her own display. Her species prided themselves on logical analysis, and she had spent weeks studying human battle recordings. "Our analysis indicates your tactics should not work. You take risks that guarantee massive casualties. You refuse to retreat even when tactically sound, and your weapons consume resources at rates that should bankrupt any civilization." Chen's expression didn't change. "May I show you something?" Without waiting for permission, she gestured off-screen. The chamber's displays suddenly showed a live feed from somewhere in space. A human fleet in formation, but unlike any ships the Coalition had seen before. These vessels were massive, their hulls gleaming with technology that seemed to bend light around it. "This is the Yuyan Prometheus," Chen explained as the camera focused on the largest ship. It was over 5 kilometers long and bristled with weapon systems that defied easy classification. "Our newest dreadnought class. It took us 60 years to design and build." 60 years. Dr. Kavalin's energy form fluctuated with surprise. "That's an entire human generation." 2 generations, actually, Chen corrected. The engineers who started the project never lived to see it completed. Neither did their children, but their grandchildren finished the work. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The Coalition thought in terms of immediate needs and quick solutions. The idea of dedicating multiple generations to a single military project was incomprehensible to their way of thinking. General Morthane found his voice first. "You've been preparing for this war for how long?" 237 years, Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Ever since our first deep space probes detected signs of galactic civilization and the Reaper threat. We decided early on that we wouldn't make contact until we were ready to make a difference." The chamber fell silent. Every species present had achieved faster-than-light travel and joined the galactic community as soon as they were able. The concept of deliberately remaining hidden while preparing for war was alien to their understanding. "Show them the real reason we're winning," came a new voice from off-screen. Admiral Chun turned and nodded to someone the Council couldn't see. "Very well. Council members, meet General Marcus Webb, commander of our ground forces." A new human appeared on screen, this one visibly older than Chun, with scars across his face and hands that spoke of personal combat experience. His eyes held something that made even the warlike Corvin shift uncomfortably. "Counselors," Webb began, his voice carrying a gravelly quality that suggested he'd spent years shouting orders over weapons fire. "Admiral Chun is being diplomatic when she talks about our preparations. The truth is simpler. We've been breeding ourselves for war." "What do you mean?" "Chancellor Vortak Jimandet." Webb gestured, and the display changed to show archived footage. Humans in combat against creatures that took the Council a moment to recognize as early-generation Reapers. 2 centuries ago, when we first learned about the galactic situation, we made a decision that other species would probably consider monstrous. We instituted a global military service program and began selective breeding for combat effectiveness. Not in a laboratory, when not that clinical. But we started encouraging unions between our best warriors, our most brilliant tacticians, our most adaptable minds. Dr. Kavalin's form pulsed with shock. You deliberately guided your own evolution? Every generation for 200 years, Webb confirmed. We also developed training programs that other species would consider torture. Our children learn to fight before they learn to read. Our civilians undergo military training that exceeds your special forces requirements. The footage changed to show human training facilities. The council watched in horrified fascination as beings who appear to be adolescents performed combat maneuvers that would challenge seasoned coalition veterans. "This is barbaric," whispered the Mindari representative. Webb's scarred face showed no emotion. "This is necessary. The Reapers don't just kill, they consume. They turn entire civilizations into resources for their expansion. When we realized that, we understood that everything we were, everything we might become, depended on our ability to fight them." Chancellor Vorthike studied the human carefully. "And this is what your entire species chose." Unanimously, Admiral Chun interjected. "Every nation, every government, every individual. We held a global referendum. The vote was 13 billion in favor of the warrior path, 0 against." The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. A species that had achieved global unity not through peace and cooperation, but through a shared commitment to become instruments of war. Prime intellect, Zaranetha's analytical mind, tried to process the data. The psychological trauma alone should have destroyed your civilization. How do you maintain social cohesion when your entire culture is built around conflict? General Webb smiled, and it was somehow more unsettling than any expression of anger would have been. Because we don't see it as trauma. We see it as purpose. Every human alive knows exactly why they exist, to protect human civilization and destroy anything that threatens it. That kind of clarity is liberating. But what about art, science, philosophy? Dr. Kavalin asked. What about the pursuits that make civilization worthwhile? We have all of those things, Chen replied. But they all serve the greater purpose. Our artists create works that inspire warriors. Our scientists develop better weapons and defenses. Our philosophers help us understand the nature of conflict and victory. The display changed again, showing human cities that somehow managed to be both beautiful and forbidding. Architecture that spoke of a civilization that had turned war into the foundation of their culture, yet had not abandoned the finer aspects of life. Our proposal remains the same, Admiral Chun continued. Full integration of human forces with coalition military command. Joint training programs for your personnel. Technology sharing agreements. And, most importantly, adoption of human strategic doctrine. Which involves? General Morthane asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. General Webb leaned forward into the camera. Total war. No retreats, no compromises, no negotiated settlements. We hunt the Reapers to their source, and we destroy them completely. Every ship, every base, every trace of their existence. The council members looked at each other, each seeing their own doubts reflected in alien faces. The humans were offering them victory, but at a cost that challenged everything they believed about civilization and war. Chancellor Vorthake made the decision that would reshape galactic history. Admiral Chun, General Webb, the coalition accepts your proposal. But understand that if we do this, if we allow you to reshape our military forces in your image, there may be no going back. Admiral Chin's smile was sharp as a blade. Chancellor, there was no going back the moment the Reapers decided to consume the galaxy. They just didn't know it yet. The human holograms vanished, leaving the Council alone with the weight of their decision. They had just agreed to transform the coalition from a defensive alliance into something resembling the human war machine. Within hours, human training cadres were arriving at coalition military academies. Human engineers began retrofitting coalition ships with new weapons and defensive systems. Human strategists started drafting battle plans that prioritized aggression over survival. The transformation wasn't easy. Coalition species struggled with human training methods that they perceived as unnecessarily harsh. Many officers resigned rather than adapt to human tactical doctrine. Entire fleets had to be reorganized around principles that seemed to prioritize offensive capability over everything else. But the results were undeniable. Coalition forces that had been retreating for 3 years suddenly began advancing. Reaper fleets that had grown accustomed to easy victories found themselves facing enemies who fought with a ferocity that their hive mind couldn't comprehend or counter. More importantly, the humans kept their word about technology sharing. Coalition ships began mounting weapons that could crack planets and defensive systems that seemed to draw power from the fabric of space itself. Medical technology that could regrow limbs and extend lifespans became standard equipment for all coalition personnel. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Reapers had encountered something they had never faced before, a species that had spent centuries preparing for this exact moment, and was enjoying every second of it. As reports of human victories flooded in from across the galaxy, one fact became crystal clear to every coalition citizen. The myths had been wrong about humanity being primitive, but they had been absolutely right about humans being unlike any other species in the galaxy. What they hadn't known was that being unlike everyone else was exactly what made humans so dangerous to their enemies and so valuable as allies. 6 months after humanity's integration into the coalition, the war had transformed into something no one had ever imagined possible. The Reapers were retreating. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UN Prometheus, watching as the final Reaper stronghold loomed before them. The enemy base was a massive structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, its organic curves and impossible geometries hurting to look at directly. It had taken the combined might of human and coalition forces 3 weeks of continuous fighting to reach this point. Final sensor sweep confirms it, reported Commander Yuki Tanaka, Chen's tactical officer. Her voice carried the professional calm that all human officers maintained, even in moments like this. That's the Nexus, the Reaper hive mind's primary node. Around them, the greatest fleet ever assembled floated in formation. Human dreadnoughts bristling with weapons that could shatter moons. Zolithian science vessels equipped with human-designed reality manipulation devices. Corvin heavy cruisers retrofitted with armor that could withstand black hole gravitational fields. Mindari support ships projecting psychic shields that protected the entire fleet from mental attacks. How long until the coalition forces are in position? Chen asked. Admiral Vextar reports all coalition task forces ready to commence final assault, responded Lieutenant Martinez from communications. General Webb confirms ground assault teams are prepared for deployment. Chen nodded, studying the tactical display. The past months had proven that human military doctrine could be successfully adapted by other species. But this final battle would require perfect coordination between forces that had been learning to work together under the most extreme circumstances possible. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered. The communications array activated, linking her voice to every vessel in the combined fleet. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, representing every major species in the galaxy, all united behind a single purpose that humans had taught them to embrace: total victory. All forces, this is Admiral Chun. Today, we end the Reaper threat forever. Not just for our generation, but for every generation that comes after us. The humans have a saying: the only good enemy is a defeated enemy. Today, we prove that saying true. She gestured to Tanaka, who began broadcasting the final attack plan to all fleet elements. It was a masterpiece of human strategic thinking, complex enough to confuse the Reaper hive mind, aggressive enough to prevent any chance of escape, and brutal enough to ensure total destruction. General Webb, status of ground forces? Marcus Webb's scarred face appeared on a secondary screen. Behind him, the launch bay of the assault carrier UN Ragnarok swarmed with activity as human Marines prepared for what would be the largest ground assault in galactic history. All teams ready, Admiral. Marines, Coalition Special Forces, and our Corvin allies are locked and loaded. We've got breach teams ready to punch holes in their defenses, and close combat specialists prepared to clear every corridor in that thing. The plan was audacious, even by human standards. While the fleet engaged the Nexus's external defenses, ground forces would actually board the structure and fight their way to its core. It was the kind of operation that would have been dismissed as impossible suicide by any other military force. But humans had spent 2 centuries learning that impossible was just another word for difficult. Commence Operation Ragnarok, Chun ordered. What followed would be studied by military historians for millennia. The human fleet attacked with their characteristic aggression, their weapons tearing gaps in space-time itself as they poured fire into the Nexus's defensive systems. But this time, they weren't fighting alone. Zilithian science vessels used their mastery of physics to create localized anomalies that disrupted Reaper defensive systems. Mindari ships projected psychic attacks that confused the hive mind's coordination. Corvin heavy assault vessels simply rammed through Reaper defenses with the kind of brute force that even humans respected. The Nexus responded with weapons that had destroyed entire star systems, but the combined fleet's human-designed defensive systems held. Energy shields that drew power from parallel dimensions, armor that grew stronger under bombardment, and point defense systems that could track and destroy individual photons. Breakthrough achieved, reported Tanaka. Breach teams are away. On the tactical display, Chun watched as thousands of small craft launched from the fleet's assault carriers. Each one packed with warriors from across the galaxy, all trained in human close-quarters combat doctrine, all ready to take the fight directly to the enemy's heart. The boarding operation was chaos made manifest. Human Marines led mixed-species teams through corridors that defied geometry, fighting Reaper drones that seemed to be made of living shadow. The enemy had never faced ground assault before. For millions of years, their strategy had been to destroy opposition from space. They were unprepared for enemies who wanted to get close enough to kill them personally. Alpha Team has reached level 7, Webb reported, his voice accompanied by the sound of weapons fire and explosions. Resistance is heavy, but we're advancing. These things don't know how to deal with close combat. Chun wasn't surprised. Humans had made close combat an art form, and they had taught their allies well. The Reapers might be masters of space warfare, but in narrow corridors and confined spaces, they were learning why humans had conquered their own planet through thousands of years of ground warfare. Bravo Team reporting. Came another voice over the comm. This one belonged to Commander Zekthara, the Zilithian officer who had first encountered humans 6 months ago. Her species had adapted to human tactics faster than anyone expected. We've secured the auxiliary control center, preparing to disable their internal defenses. The battle raged for hours. Outside the Nexus, the space battle had turned into a grinding contest of attrition. Inside, the ground assault teams fought through levels of the structure that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. But gradually, inexorably, the combined forces advanced. Human determination combined with coalition technical expertise and alien capabilities created something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Admiral, Webb's voice came through the comm, breathing hard but triumphant. We've reached the core. You need to see this. The main screen switched to Webb's helmet camera. What Chun saw made her understand, for the first time, exactly what humanity had been fighting. The Nexus core was vast beyond comprehension, filled with organic structures that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. But it wasn't just a machine or an organism. It was a graveyard. Suspended in energy fields throughout the chamber were the preserved remains of thousands of different species, each one another civilization that the Reapers had consumed. My God, whispered Dr. Kovalin's voice over the comm. The Nexury scientist had insisted on joining the assault team to study Reaper technology firsthand. It's not just their command center. It's a museum of their victories. Webb moved his camera to show more of the chamber. Each preserved specimen was connected to the core by streams of energy, their minds apparently still conscious after death, forced to serve the hive mind that had destroyed their civilizations. Not anymore, Webb said grimly. He raised his weapon, a human-designed plasma rifle that could punch through tank armor. Thomas set them free. What happened next would become the stuff of legend. Webb and his team, a mix of humans and coalition species, systematically destroyed every preservation chamber in the core. As each one shattered, the screaming of the hive mind grew louder, its coordination more erratic. External defenses are failing, reported Tanaka. The Nexus is losing power. Chin watched as the massive structure began to collapse in on itself. The Reaper fleet, suddenly cut off from their command node, became easy targets for the combined coalition forces. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before drifted helplessly as their connection to the hive mind severed. All teams, extract immediately, Chin ordered. The structure is destabilizing. The evacuation was a masterpiece of precision timing. Human-trained evacuation protocols got every soldier off the Nexus just as the structure imploded, taking with it the last remnant of the Reaper threat. In the silence that followed, Chin found herself looking at a debris field that contained the remains of an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. The war was over. Admiral, came Chancellor Vorthake's voice over the fleet-wide channel. On behalf of the entire coalition, I want to thank humanity for save it. Chin interrupted, though not unkindly. We didn't do this for thanks. We did it because it needed doing. The cleanup took months. Reaper remnants scattered throughout the galaxy had to be hunted down and destroyed. Worlds that had been consumed needed to be surveyed and, where possible, restored. The political structure of the galaxy had to be rebuilt from the ground up. But perhaps the most significant change was in the coalition itself. The alliance that had been formed for mutual defense had become something else entirely. A confederation of warrior species united by shared combat experience and human military doctrine. The integration wasn't always smooth. Many coalition citizens struggled with the cultural changes that came with adopting human approaches to conflict and society. But others embraced the transformation, finding in human philosophy a clarity of purpose they had never experienced before. Humans, for their part, began to relax their centuries-long military focus. With the Reaper threat eliminated, they could finally pursue the arts and sciences and philosophies they had set aside in favor of warfare. But they did so with the confidence of a species that had proven itself capable of protecting everything they valued. The myths about humanity had been comprehensively shattered. No longer were humans considered primitive or non-existent. They were recognized as the galaxy's premier warriors, the species that had saved civilization itself from destruction. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy thought about war itself. The human concept of total commitment, of preparing for generations to face a threat, of choosing to become instruments of protection rather than hoping someone else would handle the danger. These ideas spread throughout coalition space. Children of a dozen species grew up learning human military history alongside their own. Young Zalithians studied human tactical manuals. Corvan warriors trained in human martial arts. Mindari philosophers contemplated human concepts of duty and sacrifice. The galaxy had been transformed by war, but it had also been transformed by the warriors who had ended that war. In teaching the coalition how to fight, humanity had also taught them how to win. And in the years that followed, when new threats arose, as they always did in a galaxy full of dangerous unknowns, the response was swift and decisive. The combined forces of human-trained coalition species faced down pirates, rogue AI systems, dimensional invaders, and cosmic horrors with the same methodical efficiency that had destroyed the Reapers. The myths about humanity had been proven false, but the reality was far more impressive than any myth. Humans had revealed themselves to be exactly what the galaxy needed, a species that understood that sometimes The only way to preserve civilization was to be willing to destroy anything that threatened it. And they had taught the galaxy that lesson well.